All right, let's get started. So everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Marie Ellis. I'm the Public Policy Director at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. If everyone would just take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be fantastic. That will give our presenter, Darielle, a sense of who she's talking to today. I've got a few logistical notes for you before we get to content. So first of all, we ask that if you have questions for our presenter, for Darielle, that you put those in the Q&A feature. So you'll see that down right next to chat, but not chat. Use the Q&A for questions to Darielle. You can also click on the little thumbs up on somebody else's question, which helps me as the person moderating the questions know that more people want it answered. So it's more likely that I will ask that question if I know a bunch of people want it answered. If you have comments to share with the group, introduce yourself, things like that, put those in chat, and just make sure when you do it that you look in the to field and make sure you're giving the chat to all attendees and not just the presenters. This session is closed captioned, and so you can use the CC button that says live transcript at the bottom to toggle that on and off. We are recording the session and we'll post it on MCN social media channels tomorrow, maybe this afternoon, but let's plan on tomorrow. And we will also be sending you a copy of the slides that Darielle is using today. You'll get that either this afternoon or tomorrow as well. With all that, I'll talk a little bit about content today. So in the last legislative session, the 2021 legislative session, the legislature allocated a significant amount of funding to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, talking about $70 million in direct appropriations and competitive programs for workforce development, and another $285 million in economic development resources. I learned this morning that that's about 5 times their usual allocations for these kind of programs. So they've got a lot going on right now. And a lot of you know that because you've looked into some of these programs and went, whoa, there are a number of streams of funding and I don't really know where to go or how to get an overview. That's what we're here for today. Big picture, some of these funds are from the federal ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act, right? And some of them are state funds. So this is like one teeny tiny slice of some federal funds, and it's still a lot. I just mentioned that because at MCN, we talk a whole lot about ARPA funds and trying to figure out how to help nonprofits navigate what's out there. There's a lot of dollars coming into the state, and how do we capture those for the great work that we're all doing. So this is an overview of the funds that are administered through DEED right now. With that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. So Darielle Dannon is the Director of Government Relations at DEED. She has over 15 years of experience at the legislature in economic development, workforce development, nonprofit organizations, real estate, legislative relations, and affordable housing. That's when I first got to meet Darielle, is when we worked together on affordable housing. Darielle has a JD from Hamline University of Law. And I'm going to make a special note that she's worked for and volunteered with a number of different nonprofit organizations. Always relevant to know she's one of us. And a fun fact that's not in her official bio is that Darielle is a certified master gardener. So if you have questions about when to plant things, toss that in the Q&A too. Just kidding, don't. We'll stay on the topic at hand. With that, I think I will turn it over to Darielle.
Thanks, Marie. I appreciate that. It's true. I can maybe after we're through all the questions about our various programs, I'm happy to entertain questions about gardening. I specialize in pollinator friendly, and if you are familiar with the Lawns to Legumes program, I am a master gardener who assists with that program. So if you too wanna make your lawn more pollinator friendly, I am happy to assist. So yeah, with that, thanks for the introduction again, Marie. And as you noted, and I'm always happy to note in a group like this, before I came to government, which I've been at the state at DEED for about 5 years now, before that, my entire career was in the nonprofit sector. And so I kind of think of that as certainly where I came from. And hopefully I try to bring that into all of my work at the legislature as well. So when we're talking about all of the great work you all are doing and programs being created, I've worked with many of the folks who are on this call or folks at your organizations as we kind of created programs. So I feel that that's something, a strength, and hopefully I carry that into my work. So anyway, with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to run through a PowerPoint, As Marie noted, I think we're gonna, even though there's some slides throughout here that sort of say questions, I think if you want to put those in, use the Q&A button to share those questions, and then I think we'll take most of those just at the end. I did tell Mary she's welcome to interrupt me if there's any critical ones or if there's something I'm glossing over. So with that, I will run through my slides. You already know who I am. So this is sort of the order I'm planning to run through things. I did put the timeline in here twice because I think that the timeline for how we're rolling out programs is probably something that you all are going to want to kind of keep keenly in your mind. As Marie noted, she's going to send this out to participants after the fact, so you don't need to be scrambling and writing it down. I will also just note, if folks, as I go through this, if there's various programs, we've got links on here to hopefully help you, go to those and find out more about each of our individual programs. But one good way, if you find that your organization might regularly want to know about and apply for funding from DEED, if you were to Google our agency's name, the first screen, there's a little box that will come up, and that box will suggest that you might want to sign up for our Gov Delivery. And you can in Gov Delivery, you can tell it what kind of things you want to get notified about. So you can set it up to get notified about our grant making opportunities and RFPs. So you'll get an email into your inbox then that would let you know about those and webinars and things. That might be helpful to all of you as well. So I would strongly suggest you sign on up to those. So with that, the timeline. So you can see here that we at our agency have been very busy after the legislative session. These are only state programs, state funded programs that we are rolling out. Some of these programs listed here are sort of regular bread and butter programs, and a number of these are the new programs, which I will go through in more depth. You can see these are just 3 months. We do have a few programs that are going to go into, the next month. There'll be some program awards as well that I'll kind of continue on, but it is our goal. And actually, we met to talk about this yesterday. It is our goal to both have all of the funding RFPs out, funding awards out, and our grants under contract, if possible, by January. So we are partially due to the legislature and partially just, I think we've heard from all of you, when the legislature finishes their work, we need to get our work done very, very quickly so you all can begin your work. And you can't do that until you have your funding or know if you're going to have funding. So that is our goal here, is we're doing a lot of front loading a lot of this work, and a lot of the funds we do the RFP this time of year, and most of these are for 2 years. So hopefully this is a one-shot thing where everyone scrambles a little bit, including all of you, and then you get to work.
Darielle,
so
there's a question. Darielle, there's a question about the timeline. Is it 2022 or 2021? I believe it's 2021.
This timeline? Oh, this is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. That is a great question. You're right. I'm going to talk about funding. So we live. DEED is living in 22 right now. I always make that joke. I don't know if it's funny, but our fiscal year has already started for fiscal year 22. So we are awarding funds that will be spent in fiscal years 22 and 23, but we are doing that right now. And so Okay, so economic development and workforce development. The big picture here, as Marie said already, we do have a significant increase in funding for both of our economic development and workforce development programs. Those are sort of our two primary lines of business. I will note, this leaves out some other significant areas that we do work in at DEED. We have a whole other area that you might be familiar with, which is unemployment insurance. So while I'm noting here these large buckets of funding, I do want to just give a shout out to my colleagues over at Unemployment Insurance, who during the pandemic, they have distributed a little over $14 billion, so 14 billion, to individuals who've lost their jobs during the pandemic. So, and that's tapering off now, but this funding right here, this really is primarily in response to the pandemic. So you'll see as we go through increases of funding. Again, that's also why most of our timeline is very, very front loaded to try to get resources out very quickly, both in economic development and then in workforce development to help people kind of bring back, get employment, get back to work after the pandemic. So again, increases of funding. So I'm going to first take economic development and walk through that. I did want to note some history here before I get started with the new funds. Our agency, along with the Department of Revenue, have been the primary venues for distributing funds to support particularly small businesses. So we've distributed a little over 300 million throughout the pandemic. We were participating in those many ongoing legislative sessions. And then you can note here that we have this significant increase. So I'll just go, I've got a couple quick slides on our base budget. These are base budget funded programs. So our main programs at DEED, if you're familiar with them, they're bringing businesses to the state and helping those businesses expand. Those remain essentially base funded, so they have the regular amount of funding. It is notable, the Emerging Entrepreneur Loan Program. So many of the nonprofit sector is our primary delivery system for those funds. So organizations like MEDA, NDC, and NEON, those are organizations that we've already gotten those funds out the door, and they work with entrepreneurs individually, and they often will merge these funds with their own monies to provide, not grants, these are loans. So, and you'll note here, there's some new programs as well. This is another notable program that we started last biennium. It continues this year. This is Launch Minnesota. This is also support for entrepreneurs, but specifically in innovative businesses. So we did get continued funding for that. And so that supports a network of nonprofits who work with these, people who have a dream, the next Bill Gates perhaps, but people who have a dream and need some assistance kind of getting that dream off the ground. So those will continue, including, you can see noted here, grants directly to some of those entrepreneurs to support their work, and lots of education for them. So on to what you probably really want to know about, and that is these 4 things here. These are our key new programs or significant increases to standing programs. So I will take the Main Street Economic Revitalization Program first. I will note that we did close the first round of funding already. So I made a little note here, but this is $80 million. As some background, this funding is in some ways narrowly tailored, because what this comes out of a need to support rebuilding efforts after the civil unrest that happened last summer. And we, the agency and the governor, had asked the legislature for supports for rebuilding efforts for probably about a year before this passed. Now, we could not get that past the Senate unless we made it a statewide program. So the program is it looks a little unusual. I think it's helpful to just recognize sort of what the background reason was for this program. And then you can see noted here some of the specifics. So basically, the state is not allowed to be any more than 30% of the total development cost per project. And I'll just flip over to some of the specifics here. So that is why you can see these 3 or 4 bullets. That is why these 4 bullets are as they are, is that this is really intended to focus on, widespread arson, civil unrest, natural disasters. We somewhat expand it to be major employer closures, commercial space vacancies, and COVID impacts. But we've received the responses to our initial RFP. We are not allowed to award any more than half the funds, so 40 million in the first funding round. We will be doing another funding round for this program in the spring. We haven't announced the date that'll open yet. And then we'll have a third funding round if all of the funds have not been distributed in the first 2. So that funding round is required to be in June. We were required to do these funding rounds. The dates are in law. So I know I had some responses that folks were concerned that this came up quickly. We don't, as an agency, have any control over that, unfortunately. But hopefully we're looking to just get the word out as much as possible about this, kind of what that timeline is. And I will note for all of you that, so this, and I'll actually go back to this one. So the partner organizations is what we're awarding funding to in this round. Now, those entities will be listed on our website when we make those funding awards, and we will link to their information on their websites about how to get in touch with them about your particular project, because this is probably not funding, most likely not funding for an individual project. So if I'm a business owner and my restaurant was destroyed, this is not funding to support the rebuilding of that restaurant, but instead broader funding to support a foundation or CDFI or Community Development Corporation who's doing broader work, perhaps, on the Lake Street area or the North Minneapolis area on Broadway, who's kind of looking at a broader brush of development. And so it's likely that those either business owners or individual projects will need to work with the partner organizations on their particular project and get funded. So just to try to be clear here, and that's why we already have a tab on our website, tab on our website that is ready to go once we announce who those partner organizations are, so that we can do our best from our website to link up to let you know who you could get directly in contact with. So if you're working on a project or a business, or you had a nonprofit that was damaged, like those will end up being the go-to entities likely. And again, we're going to do another funding round. I don't think we even started looking at what we got in the first round, but we'll see what we end up awarding, and then we'll do a second and potentially a third round as well. All right, I'm going to go on to the next one, and we are either opening the website for this today, or we've already done it today. Or it's happening today. I don't know if it's open yet this morning or not, but Main Street Business Relief. Now, this is funding for specific businesses, unlike the previous one. And I know both of these programs, the legislature in their infinite wisdom gave them both the words Main Street at the beginning, but we've been referring to this as business relief. And so this is another round of funding that we will be opening a portal on September 20th. The website went live or is going live today. That will walk through all of the requirements when one applies for eligibility. So we're trying to give this a lot of lead time for folks to just get that paperwork ready, kind of be prepared, but we are required by state law to only have that portal open for 10 days. So FYI, that will be opening on September 20th. It is laid out in the law who the nonprofit partners are for this program. So DEED often doesn't do work directly ourselves. We usually work with folks who have better and closer connections to community. And the legislature determined that was the MIFs in Greater Minnesota and the Emergent Entrepreneur Loan Program lenders in the metro area. So that's sort of a standing group that works with entrepreneurs and businesses on a regular basis. And so those organizations will be reaching out into community and helping to prep folks for these applications. And they will also be doing just like they did the last time. This will be run by a lottery. So we are assuming we'll get more applications than we have funds available. And we ran it by lottery last time. As a little side note, it is the Minnesota Lottery when we run things by lottery who comes in and assists us, which is less cool to watch than you might have thought. But they will again come in and assist us once we've collected all of the applications to run a lottery, determine sort of who are the quote unquote winners of that lottery, and then we'll be working with these partners here to verify that those folks who won the lottery are eligible and then distribute checks. So not unlike how we ran this in the past. I will note for you all that there are, as you can see on the second to last bullet here, we did successfully advocate for some carve-outs for some specific kinds of businesses and for BIPOC businesses. This will be the second time we've done that. I think we as an agency and administration feel very strongly about that. So there is a special set aside of $18 million for 6 or less employees businesses, so small businesses, $10 million for minority businesses, $2.5 million for veteran businesses, $2.5 million for women businesses, and a standalone $3 million for cultural malls. We do have some small changes here as well to hopefully make the program work a little bit better. It was a little bumpy last time. So this will be something that is available for up to 200 employees, for those who are self-employed, which is a change, and will be available for nonprofits.
Ariel, I've got a couple questions
yes,
specifically about this. So one person asking, is there a URL for the Main Street Business Relief Program? I just tried to Google it and didn't find it myself. And we can send that out. If there is, I can send that out in the follow-up email.
Yeah, like I said, I ran out of time this morning. Great question. I ran out of time this morning and I didn't double check to see if it's officially, if the website's up or not yet. It's going live today because I got a heads up from our comms department. Of course, I work on the backside of a lot of these things. So we've been building the website. So it should go up today. And after this conversation, I and you can double check and then we can send it out. Absolutely.
Excellent. I will add that to the email that I'm sending later.
Do you have a couple other questions? Because otherwise I do want to spend a little more time on the nonprofit eligibility.
Perfect. Let's move to that then. And then if we have time at the end, we'll go back to questions.
Perfect. So this time, these funds are available for nonprofits. It is specific that they are nonprofits that, and this quote right here is directly from the legislation, nonprofits that operate like a business and can demonstrate financial hardship. So what that means is, and I can tell you what the legislature was imagining in this, and that was the kind of businesses that maybe have ticket sales, or nonprofits that have ticket sales or membership fees, or in the case of like an American Legion that has a bar that creates the most of the revenue for the nonprofit. So a nonprofit theater, a nonprofit yoga studio or dance studio, and something like an American Legion is what was being contemplated here. So we are going to be asking some specific information to nonprofits to kind of suss that out. But hopefully that gives you a better sense of what the meaning is for that. All right, I am going to move forward unless Marie stops me. And like I said, I didn't add the URL here. Oh, I will note that unlike previous times, we will have webinars and translated materials in Spanish, Hmong, Somali, and Vietnamese. We have a significant entrepreneurial ecosystem with Vietnamese business owners. And the portals will also be available in those languages. So individuals will be able to apply right in, Spanish. Instead of previously, we only had one application portal. So we've had a little bit more time this time to hopefully make that a little bit better user-friendly experience. Ooh, and apparently we got this up in earlier September. I did not tweak that slide. But anyway, all right, I'm going to move on to our small business partnerships. And yeah, happy to answer questions about that as we get to the end. So small business partnerships is something that the state has funded for some time. They've usually provided a small amount of funding for it. So normally we've had, I think it's 1.4 million a year for technical assistance. So these funds are technical assistance for our nonprofit partners who work with entrepreneurs so that they can provide, things like an entrepreneur needs to come in and talk to someone, get help with creating a business plan, get, all of the components of successful entrepreneurship. We want to make sure that that's an experience that can happen, without funding upfront. Now, what the legislature recognized is that there has been, because that level of funding in the past has been very low, and because we didn't know a pandemic was coming, there really were not, in many ways, there weren't adequate resources to support those folks into and through the pandemic. And so what's happening is typically when we have a recessionary event, which in some ways the pandemic was, we have a lot of folks, or if we have a large layoffs, we have a lot of folks who decide that that's a great time to start their new business and so become entrepreneurs. And we also have small businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic and need somewhere to turn for assistance. And so these increased funds are intended to serve sort of both of those purposes at once. And you'll see here, and this RFP is already open. It's due on September 15th, but this does front load those funds at 8.4 million in fiscal year 22, which is what we're in right now. So most of those funds will be, the legislature was imagining that we'd have this year, we'd have an awful lot of folks that really need some assistance, and then we'll have some decreased or sort of like regular levels of funding in the second year, so fiscal year 23. So these are some of the just notes about kind of what these are for. I think the most important one is probably the bottom bullet here, is that these funds are intended to be serving organizations that serve targeted populations. So we're really looking at nonprofit organizations that have a strong relationship and ability to serve BIPOC businesses. So often those are organizations that have individuals on staff who are native speakers of different languages, who are culturally competent, and also, of course, like I just already said, but I can't emphasize enough, strong relationships in the community. So we really want that to be, and often for all of our entrepreneurial services, these are often our front doors. So that's where people are going in. They know XYZ is a trusted, and so they'll go in, they'll receive technical assistance, and then some of these organizations are also get some of our lending dollars and have other relationships as well. So very important folks here. All right. And so, like I said, the proposals are due September 15th. We already released the RFP. This was definitely one that we wanted to get off the ground quickly. I think this is incredibly important. And you can see here, and you'll get this, the email address, and you can, if you follow that link that's at the bottom, there's all of our open RFPs are at that link, and you'll be able to click on this one, and that'll take you to, the RFPs, or sorry, the FAQs, because we do, when anyone has a question for these programs, we do normally share that question on the FAQ page along with the answer from our team, so that it's something that we want to make sure that everyone who's a potential applicant is on a level playing field here. So that's really the intention there. All right, so on to childcare. So DEED, and for very good reasons, we've been in the childcare space for a couple of bienniums now, but this one is the most significant increase in childcare resources that we've ever received. So in a normal year, we'd have about, last biennium we had 750,000 for this first bullet here, which is now 5 million. So the first one is sort of DEED's competitive grant program for childcare. The second one is a specific competitive grant, well, not competitive, this is a specific program for the MIFs, Greater Minnesota Initiative Foundations, for their childcare work in regions around the state. So the top one is the RFP that we released early this week. This is really intended, we're really looking for solutions to reduce the childcare shortage with these funds. So we are tracking the number of slots for children that each investment is able to make. And these are matching grants. So we do require communities to have some community funds that are put up against these state funds. So we've had a lot of employers who've been willing to get in and provide some of those matching funds and other things. But so yeah, this RFP is open right now. And I noted right here, the information session. You have an information session on this slide as well. So if you're interested in this, I would strongly encourage you to attend one of the information sessions. And I didn't know with the other grant programs, but if there already was an information session, that's also something that's available. If you go to the specific program, we have the FAQs up, and we also have recorded webinars. So it's always recorded, and you can definitely go and review a webinar if you didn't see it or aren't able to attend it live. Not necessary. All right, and I'm just noting here the federal funding. This is not all of it, but this is federal funding that I am 100% sure is coming to DEED, because there's some other funding out here that I think we're still sorting out, but this is in the economic development space, some federal funding that we are slated to receive. This is funding that we still have not received guidance about, and DEED will have to apply for these funds, but these are funds that will be available for small businesses. These will be available as loans or venture capital. This is actually the second time we've had this kind of funding. The first was in the last recession, but we haven't received guidance yet. So while we have a good sense that these are likely to be able to be used for loans or venture capital, we're not 100% sure, and we will need to sort of apply to US Treasury with a proposal of how we'll use the funds and have that approved. And then once that happens, then we'll be able to likely issue an RFP for eligible applicants. If we're applying by December, it's probably happening sometime this winter. So, and if history tells me anything, in the past, these funds were available for, I think, over a period of about 10 years. And so it's likely that'll be something similar to that. So I know these are likely to be loans. And so right now that, particularly for small businesses, can be kind of a hard avenue to go down. So I think we will likely have a long time to spend these funds to get them out the door. But I don't know yet because we haven't quite received guidance. I think our last note from Treasury was we should receive guidance in the next couple weeks. So at least we got a progress report, I guess. All right, I'm going to move to workforce development. So if you're in the workforce development area and I've been talking and you've been very bored, you can tune in now. So again, big picture on workforce development, we've got an increase in the funds for both competitive grants and direct appropriations of a little over $40 million from prior bienniums. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, there's been a pandemic and we had a lot of people unemployed. So the legislature was very interested in making sure there were extremely adequate resources to help support. We've got about 200,000 people that are still on unemployment insurance in the state of Minnesota. So helping them get back to work, as well as folks who might be, you know, on the sidelines, not in those unemployment insurance roles, have barriers to employment, or folks who are, you know, underemployed and need to get training to get in other employment. So I'm going to talk through a couple of new programs, including my almost last one, second to last one, I think, is probably the program I get emailed the most about. But so new programs, African Immigrant Community Economic Relief Grants. So this is a new program. If you all remember, there was a big push in 2016 for some funds specifically around equity. It was a recognition that our BIPOC communities were, at the time, it was mostly a recognition that they had not bounced back in terms of household wealth from the prior recession as our white families had. And so there was a push that provided some specific resources to communities that have had barriers to employment. But one of those communities that there had not been a program or resources for was the African immigrant community. So I think we're very excited at DEED about this new program because I think it fills a niche that has been needed for some time. But these are specific, based on some other programs that we run at DEED that do similar things. But this is specific to the African immigrant community. So this RFP is open right now, and it's due on September 14th. But this is specific to organizations to work directly with African immigrants and work on job training and employment opportunities there. So we're very, again, I think now I've said 3 times we're very excited, but we are very excited about this one. I think that there's been a push to do this for some time, and I'm pleased it got across the legislature. So another new program that we are still building, but similarly, I think we've talked about at least at DEED for some time, is the Foreign Trained Professional Program. And this program is intended to really look at ways to support folks who, let's say you're taking an Uber and you have a chat, or I guess I've done this. You're taking an Uber and you have a chat and you find out that your driver is, was a surgeon in their home country or another professional. It's really looking at helping to figure out pathways to, and it's not just healthcare, it's in-demand professions, but looking at pathways to allow those individuals who in some ways are wasting those skills from their home countries, allow those individuals to get certified and do same or similar work in Minnesota. There's a number of these kinds of programs that have popped up in other states. So I think we think there are some opportunities here, but we're going to be releasing an RFP. I checked with the team yesterday. They said late September. And we're going to be releasing an RFP for nonprofits who are willing to undertake this work to kind of build some of those pathways and licensure opportunities for those professionals, and hopefully help some of these folks transition to sort of doing similar work here. So this one we're excited about as well. All right, and not last, but almost last, is probably the program I get asked the most questions about. and that is the Targeted Community Capital Grant Program. This program is not on the timeline, and not because we're not going to be doing it. We're definitely going to be doing this. That was a joke. That we are definitely going to be doing this program. This is a program we are very much still building. I have an asterisk here because if you are paying close attention, the legislature passed $24 million for this program, but they carved $6 million out for a meat packing plant in South St. Paul. So there will be $18 million in competitive funds available. This ended up being part of the tax bill, but you should think about it as if it was part of the bonding bill. And I'm saying that because most of the projects that are funded here will have to, if not all, will have to follow the requirements that projects would follow if they were funded from the state through the bonding bill. So this is funding capital, so it's funding the building of buildings or various projects, but essentially it's not funding ongoing operating support for things, but it is funding physical structure creation. There are some specifics to this program, which I think have made folks very excited. Some of the intention behind this program was to really create an opportunity for organizations that have not typically, and you can actually see here, the Priority for Project, the first bullet I put here, is with no history of receiving capital grants from the state. And that was really some of the primary intention behind this program. This was created primarily by Chair Lee, who chairs the House Capital Investment Committee. And he was hearing very rightfully from organizations that had just getting into that bonding bill can be really challenging. You often have to have a lobbyist. It can favor organizations based in the Twin Cities. And so this is really intended to create another avenue for organizations to receive capital funding from all over the state. So you can see here kind of the bullets. I guess I shouldn't gloss over. I'll note this. So Chair Lee was also instrumental right here in the very top bullet of creating, this is the primary thrust of this program, is providing, increasing, or expanding services to underserved communities or economically disadvantaged groups or persons. And the definition in the legislation for economically disadvantaged persons or groups, it links back to essentially minority persons. There's some definitions in deed statutes that we use for some other programs. And so it really, that is in some ways coded language to really call out primarily BIPOC communities. And they would also, with the way this is, with some of the definitions, this also will focus funding in Greater Minnesota. We are required to balance the award of funds between the metro area and Greater Minnesota. So that'll be likely very close to, if not, a 50-50 split. Yeah, we'll jump over here. And fund grants will be available of up to 1.5 million. Like I said here, there's generally a match required, but the commissioner is able to waive that match. And when we roll out this program, we'll have to be asking for more information about, if you have a match or if you're asking for it to be waived and why. Notable to you all, nonprofits and governmental entities are eligible recipients of this funding. And so this is likely one of the last programs that we're rolling out. And in many ways, that's because this is in some ways unlike anything else that we do at DEED. We can't really model this program after other programs that we've done. And so we are building this one from scratch. Our goal is to release the RFP probably in October and announce the awards. Our goal is to announce the awards before we go public with the governor's recommendations for his bonding bill. So that is likely in January. And so what we really want to do is make sure we're very public about who is awarded these funds. So if those organizations are going to the legislature, we wouldn't kind of have them on two lists there. So that's our intention here. I will note that 18 million, that's a one-time award of funds, but this program was created in statute. So I will be very interested, and I've talked to our staff many times, One about, your feedback. Like I said, we're building this program, so as long as we can do it within state law, I'm happy to receive suggestions, advice, and feedback on how we build this program. But also, once folks have gone through this process, I'm also very happy to have conversations about if this program needs some tweaks. There's certainly, they created this in statute, but there's definitely the potential of tweaking the program and the legislature putting new funding into this program in the future. So FYI, stay tuned for this one as we kind of roll it out. And again, happy to chat more about your suggestions for how we build this program. All right, so I don't want to leave this one off of the table, nonprofit infrastructure grants. So one other thing that I just wanted to note before I kind of move on to a couple closing bits and then your questions is Propel for Nonprofits. So Propel for Nonprofits have been providing funds and supports for nonprofit infrastructure grant program. They've been doing that for a couple of cycles of the biennium, but they've typically received a lot less funding than this. And so we certainly advocated for this level of funding. And so Propel will be releasing their RFP. So let me back up. These are just grants to small nonprofit organizations. It's primarily focused on, or it's entirely focused on capacity building. And there are some, I didn't put the specifics in here, but there are some specifics in the legislation about kind of what the funds can be used for, but it really is intended to be technical assistance that'll build capacity, focusing on culturally specific organizations that serve historically underserved cultural communities. And again, like I said, small organizations. So really looking at small entities that need this kind of infrastructure support. They've got a great track record of the organizations that they've helped so far. They do work in some ways to help those organizations be ready to receive potentially in the future state or federal funds. So really important work. And that's an RFP that will come out from Propel. So I do have the link here, and you'll have it in the slides when you get it, about signing up for the Propel newsletter, because we were just checking with them to try to get a date. They didn't quite have a date. They're looking to roll out this RFP this fall. And so they said the website, or the newsletter, I mean, would be the best way to sign up and receive RFP information. All right, I put the timeline back on again, in case you got it at the beginning and wanted to have a look-see at it again. I'm gonna keep going though, because I feel now like I've been talking for a very long time. And so I think this is my last slide. So I just wanted to note in somewhat pre-closing, before we do questions, that while I ran through mostly state funding, as Marie said at the beginning, there still are unspent ARPA funds. And there's all kinds of federal funds that we're still sort of sussing out, either funds that were passed by Congress already that we're still kind of figuring out how they're going to flow. And also, if you've been paying attention to the news, infrastructure funds that Congress is figuring out how to pass along with their budget. And so there certainly might be other resources that come through DEED as well. So didn't talk about every single thing. That's an even more important reason for you to sign up for our Gov delivery so that when we do have new things, you will find out about it when it goes live. We are also participating in the essential worker pay, or I think we're calling it frontline worker pay now, but those ongoing conversations. Today is scheduled to actually be the last meeting of that group with their recommendations for that pay due on Labor Day. So I'm sure the paper will be covering how that comes out, but that's still in the works. And then of course I couldn't leave here without noting that it is incredibly likely we will have a probably fairly robust supplemental budget with a potential surplus. And of course, 22, we're looking at a bonding bill. And then right after that, we will have elections for pretty much everyone in the state. So with that, I am gonna, I think, stop sharing. And
all right,
yeah.
We'll move into questions then, Darielle. A couple of things I just want to note as you were talking. There's a couple questions about
so long.
About what does it mean to operate like a business, right? Like what is that? And also a question about when what do you do when there's a requirement that a nonprofit be owned in a certain way when we're not owned by anyone. So just wanted to note for everyone out there who's a member of MCN, part of what your membership dollars buy you is me and the other policy staff at MCN who try to fix those things. We are successful a lot of the time. On those two specific points, we were not. When I saw the language about needing to be owned, I called the senators who had put the language in and I said, that's not going to work for nonprofits. We're not owned. Here's some alternatives. And they said, no, thank you. Actually, what they said was, Deed will figure it out. So now it's Darielle's problem. And similarly with the nonprofits who operate like businesses, we gave them the feedback that that's not a distinction anyone uses. It'll be very confusing. If you could define that better, it'd be really helpful. And they said, no, thank you. We like the definition we used. So we did. Let's see.
Marie works very hard.
Thank you.
We had a lot of conversations during the legislative session. For better or worse, a lot of this, we went into overtime and we negotiated almost all the components I ran through. Probably took us about a month and a half to negotiate. It was probably not the best way to negotiate. It was almost entirely in secret. And so Marie and I had a lot of side conversation on all of your behalfs, trying to get things into a better shape. There were some things we were able to move. Some of the components of the Main Street Revitalization Program, some components of the Main Street Business Relief, we really tried hard, hopefully with you, to revise those and change them. But that was a really, really challenging negotiation. And that would also be a really good, Marie is an amazing point person too, depending on how the targeted community grant targeted community capital grant project, oh my goodness, you know what I mean, how that goes. If revisions need to be made to that program, Marie would also be an amazing resource to kind of think about, what should those be. And it's never one person who advocates for anything at the legislature. So she'd be an amazing resource to kind of work on that as well.
Thank you. And I can guarantee we will have opinions on it, whether they be good or bad. So
yeah.
You will hear.
I told our team, because there's a number of components on all of these that our team doesn't like either. And I've sort of told, certainly on some of these that, let me know, because we see what we can do.
So we've only got 9 minutes left. So there are a few really specific questions. So let's see if we can go through those quickly. And then there's 2 broader questions that hopefully we can save a couple minutes for at the end. So a few really specific questions. Could a clinic, and I'm guessing they mean a health clinic, but I'm not sure. Could a clinic be considered to operate like a business?
Ooh, that's a good question. If the website hasn't gone up, it will go up. And there are some more specifics on the website about what we're going to require to operate like a business. I will tell you that's not what the legislature had, the legislative intent had been there. It was really the things I listed out. So it was theater ticket sales, yoga studios, dance studios, and American Legions. Those are literally, because we passed our first round of this kind of funding in December, and those were the entities that were left out of that funding that the legislature was particularly concerned with. I would go to the website and have a look-see if you are a nonprofit clinic and see if you feel like you can fit within the guidelines. You certainly could apply in the portal. We do the additional due diligence of, checking and verifying eligibility. So, we could determine you aren't at that point, but certainly take a good look at the website and see if you feel like you meet the requirements. Marie, did not like this, and our team, of course, was like, this doesn't mean anything. There's no legal meaning of operates like a business. So we're kind of working our way through it as well. So
it was very frustrating. Since we're working from home, my husband heard a whole lot about how frustrating it was. Next
Marie called me. We had a lot of talks. We just really couldn't get it changed.
We just really couldn't. Lots of things we do. Okay, another one we'll try to do quickly. Are there any requirements around the percentage of African immigrants served by the organization? This organization serves all new Americans.
For the African Immigrant Community Economic Relief Grants?
I assume so.
Yeah, the percentage. So we are typically going to require the majority. So if you are applying for those funds, so look at the RFP and the FAQs in the program. That's up right now. Have a look at it. This is a competitive grant program, and we use a community reviewer process to help us review and score applications. And then we fund the highest scoring applications. I will tell you, we are likely to fund programs and organizations that are serving higher percentages of African immigrants. But I don't know, this is a new program, and I don't know what will come in the door. So certainly take a look at the specifics there. If you feel like you're a good fit, please, please, please apply, because we can only score and award funding to organizations that do apply. But I'm sort of assuming by the question, you do serve some African immigrants, but maybe it's not your primary focus. So, but I don't know who's going to come in. And, $2 million is not a tiny amount of funding. So, please do think about it.
And
sorry, not a clear answer, but yeah.
Am I correct that the awards that are funded, those RFPs are then public?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And just note that so people can go back and see what was funded then if your organization isn't funded, in case there's funding in subsequent years, to get a sense of it.
Yeah, the other thing we're doing is, so if you apply for funding and for some reason you didn't get funded, we are going to reach out to you and let you know that. But we're also going to reach out as part of the outreach. We're going to let you know where in the scoring. So if you look at the materials, it lays out in there what the scoring worksheet is, what kind of gives you the most points. And we're going to let you know where in that scoring you didn't rank highly, and kind of compared to the folks who got funded. We're really looking to make sure that, if you were close, or, if there could be improvements to your application, you're able to do that for next time. So hopefully that'll also be helpful to folks who don't get funded. But yes, everyone who does get funded, that'll be public. If you sign up for a Gov delivery, you'll get those announcements and you'll get some information. And you can also chat with our staff about, if there were parts of your application that didn't get funded, and if there are weaknesses, you can chat with our team too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And for anyone who gets one of those notes about why they didn't get funded, where they were at on the scoring, and you find it to be particularly helpful or not particularly helpful, you can always let me know that, and I can pass that information along to Deed as well, because the goal is to make that information helpful. We've all got the same goal. Yeah. I do know that we've got some foundation and other intermediary folks on the call, so I want to make sure to get this question in. The success of many of these programs relies on considerable capacity and work from intermediaries or partner organizations. Beyond the admin fee, what resources, tools, or support is Deed offering to ensure intermediaries are well equipped to deliver equitable outcomes across the state?
Yeah, okay, good question. It's a broad question. So for each and every program, I think we've been taking these kind of one by one, and we have been at our agency trying to take your feedback and look at ways that we can provide more support, from our agency, so that it's not on you or the intermediaries to do the work. So translation services would be a good example of that. Also trying to create updating. We actually working with a completely new vendor for some of our portals, particularly the lottery portal. This time that I think will be a more user-friendly experience. So individual businesses should be able to apply directly instead of working maybe with some of those intermediaries to do that work. The challenge with our agency, so I'm always, if you have suggestions on any of this, if this is arising because you have some suggestions on ways we should be thinking about making this more user-friendly, or about ways that we can provide you with more supports so that this is a more equitable experience, please let Marie and I know. I am always happy to take those in-house. We actually have meetings I just had one yesterday, to work through all of our different programs and look at that. I have staff who that is their job, is to kind of help us do both outreach to various cultural communities, like outreach to folks who we normally wouldn't outreach to directly from the state agency, but also if there are ways that we can provide you with supports or might be more creative, I'm happy to entertain those. Sometimes we can do those things, and then sometimes I need to fight at the legislature to let us do those things. So things like admin fees, I am extremely aware those admin fees are much lower than what folks would like. I will tell you, Marie and I were both pushing really hard on that one, and we're not as successful as we had wanted to be, but we are trying to take on some of the components that I know had been on our partners in prior rounds. We're trying to do those in-house. So particularly translation is a big one, but some of the outreach as well. So, let me know how we can be more supportive. It's certainly our goal. It is our goal to break down some of those barriers, provide better access, and hopefully work with you.
Excellent. With 2 minutes left, I think I'm not going to ask any more questions, but I will just note one that is near and dear to my heart about the Nonprofit Recovery and Resiliency Fund and how important that would be. So the question is about how supportive DEED is of that proposal, but perhaps we'll ask offline about that one since we're about out of time. And then I'm going to save the other questions that are there and see if we can maybe get some answers from Darielle in writing, and then I can add those to the email. They're all pretty specific and I think pretty easy to answer for you, hopefully.
I'm happy to do that. And if folks go to those different programs, if they follow the links, we have FAQs up and recorded webinars too. So it's possible your question has already been answered. Absolutely feel free to go there. Some of the specific questions, because of what I stated earlier, that we always want to make sure all of our potential applicants are on a level playing field. We're actually required by state law to post questions and their answers on specific programs to the website. So we try to do that daily. So please feel free to go there too, in case that's already been answered.
Excellent.
But I'm happy to help.
Excellent. And I'm going to turn it over to Katina to close us out.
Thanks, Marie. Hi, everyone. I'm Katina Mortensen. I'm the Director of Public Policy at the Minnesota Council on Foundations, and we are just really pleased to partner with MCN and with DEED on this presentation today. We've been working closely with Marie on many of these issues since we have a shared interest in a strong charitable sector. So this is a topic of great interest to us as well. I just want to thank everyone for being here and learning about all of these opportunities, and particularly thank Darielle for her great presentation and sharing. It seems like one of my takeaways, there are many opportunities. There's always more opportunity to influence as well as new programs come. And it seems like opportunities for nonprofits to serve as partner organizations and to be recipients of some of these programs. So thank you so much, Darielle and Marie and all of you for being here, and have a good rest of your day. And I'll lastly say that the link to this will be probably tomorrow, it sounds like, on social media and on MCN's website as well. So thank you all.